Winter arrived early, the year the world forgot Caleb Rowe. It came down from the mountains without ceremony, quiet and patient, laying its white claim over the plains like it had all the time in the world. Snow covered the fences first, then the empty road, then the old wooden sign that once read Rowe Ranch, but now stood crooked. The paint peeled so badly, the name looked more like a memory than a place. Caleb stood on the porch and watched it fall. He had been standing there a long time, long enough for the cold to creep through his boots and into his bones, long enough for the kettle inside to scream itself hoarse and fall silent again. He didn't move. He rarely did these days unless something demanded it, hunger, the animals, or the ache in his chest that came when he stood too still with his thoughts. The ranch was quieter than it used to be, not the peaceful kind of quiet people romanticized in stories, but the heavy kind, the kind that pressed against your ears until you noticed how alone you were. No laughter, no footsteps, no voice calling his name from the barn or the kitchen, just wind, snow, memory. Caleb was 43, though the mirror insisted he looked older. His hair had gone prematurely grey at the temples, his beard uneven from neglect. His shoulders were still broad, built by years of work, but they slumped now, like they were tired of holding him together. He pulled his coat tighter and finally stepped off the porch, boots crunching against frozen ground. The barn door groaned when he opened it, a sound he'd known his entire life. Inside, the horses lifted their heads, breath fogging the air. There were only 2 now. Once there had been 12. "Morning," he muttered, though it was already past noon. The brown mare nudged his shoulder, impatient. He allowed himself a small smile, brief, instinctive, gone before it could turn into something dangerous like warmth. As he worked, his mind wandered where it always did when his hands were busy, backward, back to when the ranch was loud. When his wife, Anna, would sit on the fence with a book, pretending not to watch him work, but always looking up when she thought he wasn't paying attention. Back when his son, Thomas, ran barefoot through the grass, laughing like the world couldn't touch him. Back before winter became permanent. Caleb finished feeding the horses and shut the barn door just as the sound reached him, faint, almost lost to the wind. A cry. He froze. It came again, thin, weak, human. Caleb's first instinct was disbelief. People didn't come out this far anymore, not in winter. The town was miles away, and the road was barely passable. Still, the sound cut through him, sharp and undeniable. He followed it toward the tree line. There, half buried near a fallen log, was a child. A boy, no older than 10, curled in on himself, clothes too thin for the cold, cheeks flushed an alarming red. His lips were cracked, eyes half-lidded with exhaustion. Caleb swore under his breath and dropped to his knees. "Hey," he said gently, voice rough from disuse. "Hey, kid, you hear me?" The boy stirred but didn't answer. Caleb didn't hesitate again. He shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around the boy, lifting him with care that surprised even himself. The child was light, too light, hunger light. The walk back to the house felt longer than usual, the snow thicker, the wind louder, as if the land itself was watching him carry this small, fragile thing across it. Inside, the house smelled like dust and old wood. Caleb laid the boy near the fire and stoked it until the flames roared back to life. He poured water, warmed it, pressed it to the boy's lips. Slowly, painfully, the boy drank. "What's your name?" Caleb asked. The boy swallowed. "Eli," he whispered. Caleb stiffened. Not because of the name itself, but because of the way it echoed something inside him. A reminder that names had weight, histories attached to them. "Where you come from, Eli?" The boy's eyes drifted to the ceiling. "Nowhere." That answer hurt more than any explanation could have. Eli stayed awake, just long enough to eat a little bread and broth before sleep claimed him. Caleb sat nearby, watching the rise and fall of his chest, an unfamiliar tightness settling in his ribs. He told himself this was temporary. He would take the boy to town when the storm passed. He would do the right thing and then go back to his quiet, controlled loneliness. But winter has a way of rewriting plans. Days passed. The snow didn't stop. Eli grew stronger, though he remained cautious, moving through the house like he expected to be chased out at any moment. He spoke little, but he watched everything. the way Caleb moved, the way he paused before answering questions, the way he stared at old photographs like they might bite him. One evening, as the fire crackled low, Eli finally asked, "Why do you live out here alone?" Caleb didn't answer right away. "Because," he said finally, "sometimes it's easier to stay where things already hurt than risk new pain." Eli considered that. Then quietly, "I don't like being alone." Caleb looked at him, really looked at him, and something shifted. The snow outside kept falling, erasing tracks, burying the past. Inside the house, something fragile began to thaw. Not hope exactly. Not yet, but the possibility of it. And for the first time in years, Caleb Rowe did not feel entirely forgotten. By the time the storm loosened its grip on the valley, Eli had learned the shape of the house. He knew which floorboard creaked near the stairs, how the window by the kitchen rattled when the wind changed direction, and which chair by the fire was Caleb's, even though the man never said so. He learned the rhythm of the ranch, too, when the horses needed tending, how long the kettle took to boil, how silence could mean comfort instead of danger. It took longer to learn Caleb. The rancher moved through his days like someone careful not to disturb a sleeping animal. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried weight, like he wasn't used to wasting them. He never asked Eli too many questions, and for that the boy was grateful. Still, winter had a way of drawing truths out of people. One morning, Eli stood at the window, watching snow slide slowly from the roof of the barn. "Do you think spring knows where we are?" he asked. Caleb, sharpening a knife by the table, paused. "And spring always finds its way," he said. "Might take its time, though." Eli nodded, as if that explained something important. They worked together that day, clearing snow, checking the fence line, where posts leaned under the weight of ice. Caleb showed Eli how to walk steady on frozen ground, how to listen for the hollow sound that meant thin ice near the creek. "You don't rush winter," Caleb said. "You respect it." Eli repeated the words under his breath like a rule worth remembering. That afternoon, they found the old sled buried behind the barn. Its wood was cracked, the rope frayed. But Eli's face lit up like the sun had finally clocked in. "Does it still work?" Caleb hesitated. The sled had been Thomas's. He hadn't touched it in years. "It might," he said, voice careful. They fixed it together. Eli laughed when it slid down the small hill behind the house, his joy bright and unguarded. Caleb watched from a distance, hands in his pockets, chest tight. The sound of that laughter haunted him long after the sun dipped. Behind the mountains, that night as the fire burned low, Eli asked the question Caleb had been avoiding. "Did you have a family?" Caleb stared into the flames. He could lie. He knew how to do that. But the truth pressed against his ribs, demanding space. "I did," he said quietly. "What happened?" Caleb swallowed. "Winter," he said, in its own way. Eli didn't push. He just nodded and leaned closer to the fire. Outside, the wind howled like it disagreed. The next day, Caleb hitched the mare to the wagon. "We're going to town," he said. Eli's shoulders stiffened. Am I staying?" The question landed heavy between them. "I don't know yet," Caleb answered honestly. "But you deserve food that doesn't come from a can and boots that don't let snow in." The road to town cut through open land, white and endless. The buildings appeared slowly, like they were being revealed rather than approached. Town hadn't changed much, still small. Still tired, but faces turned when they arrived. Caleb felt it immediately. The looks, the whispers. "That's Rowe," someone muttered. "Haven't seen him in years." "And the boy." Caleb ignored them, focused on Eli, who walked close, eyes wide but steady. At the general store, the clerk raised an eyebrow. "Didn't think you were the babysitting type." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Just need supplies." Outside, Eli tugged his sleeve. "Do they not like you?" Caleb crouched to meet his eyes. "People remember what they want to," he said. "That's their business." They visited the schoolhouse next. The teacher, a kind-eyed woman named Mrs. Hart, listened quietly as Caleb explained. "There are options," she said gently. "Families who could take him in." Eli's fingers curled into Caleb's coat. Caleb felt something snap. Not loud, not dramatic, but final. "I need time," he said. Mrs. Hart nodded. "Time is a luxury winter doesn't usually give," she said, not unkindly. The ride home was quiet. That night Caleb couldn't sleep. He sat at the table, staring at the empty chair across from him, remembering nights when Anna sat there reading aloud. Thomas sprawled on the floor with his toys. He hadn't planned on this. He hadn't planned on caring. But Winter didn't ask permission. Days passed. Eli started calling the ranch home without realizing it. He fed the horses, helped cook, asked questions about the land like it might answer back. One evening, while patching a tear in a blanket, Eli said softly, "If I have to leave, will you forget me?" Caleb's hands stilled. "No," he said. "Some things don't get buried by snow." The words surprised them both. The storm returned that night, fiercer than before. Wind battered the house, snow piling high against the doors. The fire struggled. Eli woke crying, shaking from a dream he wouldn't describe. Caleb sat with him until dawn, the boy's head against his chest, small and warm and alive. In that moment, Caleb understood something he'd been running from for years. Loss hadn't broken him. Avoiding love had. When the storm finally cleared, the land lay quiet and shining, untouched and honest. Caleb stood on the porch, Eli beside him, both staring at the wide, white world. "What happens now?" Eli asked. Caleb breathed in the cold air, steady and sharp. "Now," he said, "we figure it out, together." The snow didn't answer, but it didn't object either.